So first of all, welcome everyone. My name is Wendy Thomas, and I am the technical lead for IATI. I am joined today by my technical team colleagues, Alex Lydiot, who is senior developer, and Nick Oswald, who is a member of our developer team.
Hello.
Hi. So in this session, we're going to talk about IATI's new integrated platform, and in particular, the API gateway and our validator API. I just wanted to flag at the start that this is an IATI advanced session, and it will probably be quite technical. So everyone is absolutely welcome, but I did want to give a heads up that this will be one of the more technical presentations going on today. So what we're going to do today is I'll begin by spending a few minutes talking about the process that has led us to develop an integrated platform, which was an outcome from last year's technical stocktake. I'll briefly show our stocktake roadmap to give some context of the wider work that we're doing. And then I will hand over to my colleagues who will talk about a core feature of the integrated platform, which is our API gateway, as well as the validator API, and they'll do a deep dive and live demo of those for you. Great. So first of all, I'm just going to talk a little bit about why an integrated platform. So currently, IATI's core tools are built on separate platforms that have different access points. Last year, we had a technical stocktake, and that was a series of workshops with the Secretariat and our wider community to look at our technical estate and make recommendations for the future. And one of the key recommendations from the stocktake was to move towards an integrated system architecture to help improve efficiency and provide a more unified user experience. This will also, we hope, bring consistency and eliminate some of the redundancies that currently exist within the system. IATI's governing board approved the stocktake's recommendation that we establish an API gateway as a key first step in this move. In addition to providing an integrated access point, the gateway will also bring us some benefits, such as allowing us to track usage and help us protect our technical estate from attacks. We plan to use and implement the gateway in a gradual, iterative fashion, starting with the new APIs, such as the validator, and then adding in existing APIs as we go. So the next two slides, I'm going to show briefly some of our technical roadmap, which details the recommendations that resulted from the stocktake and were approved by the governing board. So today's session is going to focus on the first two items that you see there on the screen, which are the gateway and the validator API. But I'm just going to briefly talk through some of the other big pieces of work on our work plan this year, just to give you that context. So they include the semantic data layer project. And semantic data, our interpretation of this is that it gives a basic relationship and meaning to data. So it allows data to be interpreted without human intervention. IATI's data is published in XML, as we mostly all know, so a semantic data layer is needed for more users to feel comfortable working with IATI data. So this piece of work is going to be a UX project that will involve looking at previous user research we have done, talking to stakeholders, updating our user personas, and developing a representation of semantic data and suggesting how best to make it available to users. Another piece of work that is somewhat connected to that involves dportal and looking at some improvements to dportal so that we have a proper version 2 of this very popular tool for our non-technical users. Other work that we have on the roadmap, publishing tool options. We've been doing some research into this for options for a publishing tool for IATI. And then later on, well, actually starting this quarter and going on for the next quarter, we'll be looking at a new publisher statistics methodology and doing some research on what might be required for that. This is the rest of our technical roadmap, and it includes a bit of business as usual work and maintenance work on some of our regular tools, such as the registry and the data store. And it also highlights some other stocktake recommendations on our work plan, including some work we have done this year on thinking about whether or not we should consider storing publishers XML, and an investigation later on this year to look at whether making historical data available is something that we should be considering as IATI. So I'm going to hand over to Alex now, but at the end of the presentation, we will put some links up on the screen that will tell you where you can go to find out further information about our wider technical plans. And just a heads up, we are planning to publish a quarterly news post next week that will update the wider community on our progress in Q1 so far and what we're planning to do in Q2. So I'm going to hand over to Alex Lydia now to take it over.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'd like to talk a little bit about the process that starts really with the conclusion of the stocktake of last year and the recommendations there. And it brings us up to the point we are at the moment, which is implementing the Validator API, and then talk a little bit as well about the continuing process towards deployment of that and of the API gateway. So the recommendations last year, well, there were many recommendations, but one very clear one was to move our various tools into a unified platform where they'd operate within a microservices architecture. So lots of discrete applications that do one thing very well. And with those applications communicating with each other via APIs, and with those APIs then managed behind an API gateway. So why does IATI want to use an API gateway? Well, we want to protect our APIs from overuse and abuse using rate limiting and, where applicable, API key authentication. So all the APIs, all the public APIs, we will have a level of rate limiting, so limiting the number of requests that can be sent to any given API to ensure that that API isn't overused, and as a result, we have a degradation or a loss of service. There's a couple of key things there. You've got to set it at a level that will protect the API, but also a level which will provide an appropriate level of service, so an appropriate number of people allowed to come in and make requests at the same time. And that protects you against overuse and abuse. I think really within the IATI context, we don't seem to see a great deal of nefarious neglect. So not a lot of people wanting to bring us down through denial of service attacks. We do occasionally see accidental denial of service attacks, usually coming from a bit of software which might be a little bit too excited and decides to send off 100 requests a minute to a particular API by accident. And that has led, I've seen it since I've been here. I've been with IATI for about a year, and I've heard of other instances to short periods of loss of service. So the API, the rate limiting, will protect against that. And then where applicable, we're looking to use API key authentication. I say where applicable, certain of the APIs it won't be applicable to, and I'm thinking one key example will be a registry API, because it's already out there, it's already completely open and has many, many users. Quite probably a lot of users that nobody now even knows about, scripts that might have been running on a server for 10 years somewhere in the background, and everybody's moved on. And if we were to put authentication up in front of the API, we would, with the best will in the world, end up breaking some services. So we wouldn't be doing that there. But with the validation API, which I'll talk about a little bit in a few minutes, we do intend to put authentication up in front of there, essentially because it's a much more costly service, costly in terms of CPU, and therefore costly in terms of actual hard money. So and it's brand new, so we have no existing users to continue to support. We can go in with a fresh outlook there. We want to understand how people use our APIs via analytics and monitoring tools. So yeah, the API gateway will allow us to see who is using what service, when, and at what frequency. Either literally who, if we've got key authentication, or generally who, if we can see by IP where somebody might be located, and general aggregated statistics. And that would be great for us, because we've really been a little bit blind, I think, to the use of APIs up until this point. and we find out that people are using them when we didn't know before. We kind of mining logs from various Unix servers, which might be, retaining logs to a month, 3 months, we don't know, and in disparate places. So to be able to have a unified place we can really see what is happening with the APIs will be great. Through that analysis, we might identify real-world cases which we could use to better accommodate the users in future releases. So one example of this might be, we might notice that somebody is using route A, and then route B, and then route C. And there might be a group of users and they're using route A, route B, route C in short order. And we can see that sequence, we can see that pattern. And by identifying patterns like that, we can then, from those analytics, think, okay, well, in a future release, perhaps we should be designing an API with route D. And what route D does is use route A, route B, route C, and that will offer a much easier way for that group of users to gain IATI services. And yeah, users will be able to find all IATI API services, documentation, and change logs in a single place. So if you want to use an IATI API, you will know where to go. There will be a developer portal. It will have the documentation in there, and you'll be able to try out the various APIs there. You'll be able to see where they're going, where they've been in terms of development. And yeah, and it'll be a one-stop shop for all APIs. Yeah, so I'd just like to talk a little bit about the Validator API, the public Validator API development process that we're in the middle of at the moment. And this began back in, I think, October of last year. It extended out over the end of last year, excuse me, and we also had a few conversations at the beginning of this year in January. And this is so it started with the requirements gathering exercise. And we talked to quite a wide range of publishers, from the very large to the medium size to the bespoke, and also as providers of publishing platforms. And thank you very much. I don't know if any of you are here today, but thank you very much for your input there. I think we had some really good conversations, and gained a good insight into what people really want from a Validator API, which led us to designing the draft API contract. Essentially, we identified two key requirements. The first of which was to provide what essentially the Validator version 1 does, but as an API. So for already published IATI documents, you'll be able to go to the API and you'll be able to say, please give me the validation documents for these, the validation report, sorry, for these documents. And then the second requirement would be a way of validating your IATI document before you publish. So with a post route, you send the IATI document and you get returned in the response a validation report synchronously and on demand. And that would allow people to validate before they publish, which we think will be, really important. I mean, it makes a lot of logical sense to validate first and publish second, as opposed to publish first and validate second. So yeah, we drafted the API contract, which is out there in the public domain. We went on to have a community consultation, which was last month, March, via IATI Connect. And again, thank you very much for all the valuable input that was that came through that. And then we are now in the implementation of the API contract stage. That's what we're doing at the moment. And in a few minutes, or probably less than a few minutes, I shall pass over to my colleague, Nick, who will show you where we're at with that. And then just quickly, I'd like to say where we'll go from here. So once we've implemented the contract and we have a working API, we will move on to testing it as rigorously as we can, to include functional correctness, of course, so that we're assured that it provides its side of the contract. Also that it does so within appropriate response times, especially with the second route. The first route will be you know, it's pretty meat and potato sort of stuff. The second route is much more involved technically, and we need to know that we can provide those responses for the largest admittable files of 50 megabytes within appropriate response time. And also load capacity, so that we can do it not just within that response time, but also for an appropriate number of users simultaneously. Then we'll move on to early access for a focus group of API users. We had in the requirements phase a number of organizations very interested in coming on board with that, which is great. And if anybody else would like to jump on board and have early access and help us out at that stage, that'd be great. Give us a shout. And once we've gone through that phase, we should be in a good position and confident to say we are ready to release the version 2 of the validator, which will include the implemented public API. And now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Nick, who will show you where we're at currently with both the API gateway and in particular the developer portal and with the validation API.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so before I go into the demo, I did want to cover a little bit more of the implementation and technical details where we are so far. So version 2 of the validator, we're using this opportunity to migrate it to a modern scalable cloud platform, specifically Azure serverless functions, and then moving it to an implementation consistently in one language in Node.js. And one thing that's helped us with is it's provided us with a template for that unified platform microservice that Alex mentioned earlier in the presentation. And we also think that this technology stack will enable us to provide a fast synchronous API as we've talked about. And then again, the reasonings behind wanting to provide a public API are really just giving publishers and publishing tools a way to integrate validation into their workflows and ideally increase data quality at the end of the day before publishing. So as far as the demo, what you'll see today as I get set up is one thing I wanted to call out here too is on the API gateway, the developer portal, the public validator API, and the validator version 2. Those components are in development, very much still in development. They're not yet available for public use and testing. As Alex covered, that will be reaching out in the future when they are, and also very much subject to change. And I'll cover some of the points that we know will be changing too during the demonstration. One thing that I will be showing that is existing live API that you can use today and many people are using is the Registry API, as Alex mentioned before. And what we'll be showing here is using the Registry API through the new API gateway and how that will look without authentication. So I'll cover two main user stories for today. So one will be for somebody who is a registry API user. So in this case, they might be a publisher developer that wants to interact with the registry through the API, or potentially a data user developer that wants to know about all of the publishers of IATI data or know some metadata about different publishers. And then the other user story will be covering users of the validator API. So this could be potentially a publisher's in-house developer or a publishing tool developer that wants to use the API to either get validation reports, like Alex mentioned, for already published IATI data, or if they want to validate IATI data on demand by posting us an XML file and getting that back, and ideally to, do that before publishing and to ensure that you're publishing good, valid data. So back to the registry API user. So I would be able to come to this portal. So this is the developer portal for the IATI API Gateway, and go ahead and explore APIs. And then I can see a list of available APIs here. I know that I want to use the registry at this point, but if I didn't, there's some nice descriptions here to say, a basic description of what the different API services do. I could go ahead and select the registry. And then I'd be greeted by a pretty common view if you're an API developer and you're getting information about that. You can see the different endpoints on this panel on the left. So things like a publisher list, publisher details. If I select that endpoint, then I get more information about that service. So you can see this publisher list will return a list of names of IATI publishers, and some more details about that. I can see what the URL is for me to make that request. And then I can also go ahead and try it out right here in the developer portal. So I can see what the endpoint is going to be, parameters, headers. I'll also tell me in a couple different languages or types here how to make that request. But I can also go ahead and directly make it here in the portal. And great, I see that I've gotten a 200 OK response. And the response here in results is actually an array of publisher IDs. So then I can go ahead and select one of those. And maybe I want some more details about that specific publisher. So I go to the publisher details endpoint. I can see how the request should be formed. And in this case, this allows for a request parameter of an ID, and that information there. So if I go ahead and try this out, you can see the developer portal provides me with a place to enter that parameter. So I want to find more information about Act for Africa. And then again, I can see how I might form that request if I was developing in Python or JavaScript, other languages. I can go ahead and make that response as well. And as you can see here, I get a JSON response of information about that specific publisher that I could use in my tool. So again, the registry example here, this registry API actually has many more endpoints and is more robust. And there's a link available on the last slide that I was showing you with all of that detailed documentation information here. But this is just what we wanted to show you as how an API would look through the API gateway if it had no API key or authentication required. So pretty much the same, but it gives us some additional tracking abilities and rate limiting abilities and benefits that Alex discussed earlier. So my next user story here that I talked about is now getting to the validator API. So in this case, I'm a publisher's in-house developer or a publishing tool developer. I want to validate some IATI data or an IATI file. So I'll go ahead and explore my APIs and select the IATI validator endpoint or API. In this case right now, we only have one endpoint available, which is post one, and it's called validate. And you can see what URL I should make that request to, what the expected request headers are, what the body is expected to be, in this case, an IATI XML file. That's looking good. And then I also get additional information about responses I could receive from the API. So, for example, if I messed up and I didn't provide a body, I should see this JSON response with a 422 is no body. Or if potentially I format my body incorrectly, I would see this response. And then as well as if there's a positive response, an OK, what does that JSON report potentially look like? And in this case, it'll actually provide a JSON schema as well as a detailed representation of what that validation report would look like. Now, this is one of the things that is not set yet and will change. Right now, this is displaying the schema of the JSON that is returned from the current validator backend to the front end that is consumable for our front end of the current validator, which is not as usable and consumable by someone using a public API endpoint in their application. So we do plan on making this more usable as a public API, and also consulting with the community in the future on what will be the most useful pieces there once we kind of get a base design in place for that. So lots of information there about it. Let's go ahead and try it out now. And so, similar screen as before is trying out the registry API, has the ability to add a body. But what you can notice here is that if I go ahead and send this response right away, I'll get a 401 unauthorized, and my access has been denied due to a missing subscription key. You can also see that there is this field here asking for a subscription key. So let's go ahead and figure that part out. And in that case, what I can do is go ahead and sign up for an account. I'm not going to have you watch me do that here, but you would be able to sign up for an account here, CAPTCHA. You would get an email where you confirmed your email address and be able to have an account and sign in. So I'm going to sign in with an account I have already. And we'll go ahead and look at my profile so you can see what a user profile might look like. So what you can see here is in my subscriptions is that I already have an exploratory subscription where I can grab those API keys. So let's talk a little bit more about subscriptions. The two subscriptions we plan on offering here will be an exploratory one like you saw that I had. And in that case, this will be something where no approval is required. Once you get an account, confirm your email, you can go ahead and add this exploratory subscription to your account, and you'll be able to make, right now we have it set as 5 calls a minute, a maximum of 100 calls a week, just to try out the APIs and get to know them a little bit. But once you want some more full access, you want to actually integrate it into your application, test it more heavily, or go live, you can request full access. And full access will have higher rate limits, but it will require approval on our side by someone on the IATI technical team. And the idea here is really, anybody it's still a public API, it's open. So really anybody that looks like a legitimate human will be approved. We're not going to have any sort of approval detailed process. And it's really only, as we said before, to prevent abuse, either intentional abuse or accidental abuse, and allow us to shut things off if things are going badly. It's not to gatekeep who is allowed to use this service. So in the case that I wanted to access, add a full access subscription, this is how I would do it. You subscribe, and you can see that now the state there is submitted and need to be approved by an administrator. So let's go back to the validator and see about getting some IATI data validated. So I'm going to go back to try it. And now you can see here that I'm logged in and have an active subscription. It's already populated there for me, which is great. I don't have to copy and paste any API keys. And in the body, I'm going to paste in a pretty basic organizations file of IATI data, and go ahead and send that response off. Great. And now I've got a 200 response back, successful. I can see a bit of a summary of the information here. That's a IATI organizations file. Shinoski you've passed a schema validation with no errors. This is a good file and some metadata about that. Again, this is the report that was created to be consumed by a front-end web page of the current validator. And we plan for the public API to modify this to make it more user-friendly as a public API. So the other option here is that I can upload a file too. So if I have a specific file that I want to upload and validate through here, I can do that as well. Again, an activities file you successfully validated here, and that was a good file, although this did have one warning with it, an issue with reporting org identifier. A few more things I want to point out in the developer portal while I'm here are some things that should make it easier for you as you're using IATI APIs. So one thing you can see here is that you'll actually be able to export the API definition in a standard format, OpenAPI, as well as WADL. And so that makes it quick and easy to import into a tool like Postman or whatever thing that you develop APIs with, and having that in a standard format. There'll also be a change log feature. We haven't made any changes to be logged in this yet because it's very much in development, but you'd be able to see when things changed with that API, and as that's of critical importance when you're using an API. And then in terms of reporting, there's this reporting tab once you're logged in, where you'll be able to see for your account information about how you've used those APIs and our APIs. So you can see how I've been using them over the past week or so, getting prepared for this presentation. Things like response times, and then more detailed information about the use of those different APIs, maybe how you're using different endpoints, and things like that. And on our side, we also have even more detailed information about that across all users, so that we can really understand our users better, and as Alex mentioned before, provide better services in the long run. So that's mainly looking at just the developer portal, but many of you likely, if you're a developer like me, use a tool like Postman to work with their APIs and during the development process. So I wanted to show here that all of this is also very much doable in a tool there as well. So here I've taken the endpoint for that publisher list from the registry definition. It's a GET request, and I can go ahead and send that off and get that nice list of publishers. And one thing to point out here is that I'm not using any authorizations, just making a direct GET request from my machine. And then if I go to get some publisher details, I can enter in which publisher I want to get more information on, send that request off, and get that information that I requested here as well. Now, for the validator endpoints, I will need to use an API key, and this is laid out in the developer portal about how to set this up and how to specify that key. And so I'll go ahead and send that request off, and I've already put my API key in here as well, so nobody can steal it. And again, with a body of an organization file, getting a similar response as I was in the API gateway in the developer portal, but in my familiar tool of using Postman. And then I can go ahead and send off quite a few more requests here, just to exercise the API a little bit, if you will. But the one thing I wanted to show you here is what rate limits will look like. So I just exceeded that exploratory rate limit by doing more than 5 requests in a minute. And so you can see that I get very clear HTTP response code of too many requests and a message, and even tells me very nicely that I can try again in 20 seconds when the rate limit is up. Yeah, and again, just wrapping up, the API Gateway, Developer Portal, and Validator version 2 public API are in development and subject to change still, but that registry API is available if that's something that you're interested in using or already using. And now I've seen the chat box moving quickly next to me, so I'm guessing there have been some questions, but I think this is our time to answer some of those questions verbally.
Thank you for that, Nick, and thank you, Alex. I think, yeah, the chat box has been really good and really helpful with questions and several answers provided already. And just a reminder to myself to save the file, because I think that's always useful to have. But there were a couple of questions that came through that I don't think we've picked up as we've gone along. So if it's okay, I'll read those out, and Nick or Alex, if you can respond, that would be great. So there was one from Matt Geddes asking about, actually you had a couple, Matt. I think the first one you had was saying it would be great for the approval conditions to be published somewhere official. And I think that was a question that came up while you were speaking, Nick.
Sure, yeah, that sounds reasonable. And I think you're talking about the approval for the full access API key. And as I said, it's pretty much, it's a public API. We want it to be open. So as long as it looks like a legitimate, not a bot trying to create an account, we're likely to approve it. And in the case that we do need to cut somebody's use off, then we would be reaching out to that person about, hey, why are you hitting this API 500 times a second? Do you mean to do that? Find out, is it a legitimate use case as well?
Right, thanks for that, Nick. I think another question, which might possibly have been picked up, but just in case, also from Matt Geddes, is will the Codeless API be in the developer portal?
There's no specific kind of schedule of which APIs will be there. No reason why not. I think the specific schedule we have as per the roadmap is that we're working as a development team on on delivering the API gateway and the developer portal and the public validator API this year. We're also working with Deralinx, who are the provider of the IATI registry, and working out how we can bring that behind the gateway with as close to zero or preferably zero effect on current users of the registry. And after that, to be confirmed, I guess.
Great, thank you for that one, Alex. I'm just checking through to see if there are other questions on here that we have missed. Please pop your questions in the chat if you've got anything else for us. We've also had a handy time warning from our timekeeper that I think we have about 12 or 13 minutes left. And Herman, I think you've raised your hand, and since we have plenty of time for questions, I'm happy for you to go ahead and ask your question, and we will answer it.
Yes, my question is about the Data Validator API. In the demonstration, you showed how to check an XML file before publishing by sending it to the validator and waiting until the results come back. How about the pre-cooked error reports, which are currently were part of the original Data Validator developed by Data for Development? And the big advantage of having a pre-cooked cached error reports for all the publishers, of course, is that you can very speedily give back the response time without a lot of processing, enabling big loads on the API.
Certainly, I think, well, there's 2 points there. Firstly, absolutely, that's part of the API contract. I don't know if you've seen the API contract. There's 2 routes and the first one does exactly that. So it goes around and the validator validates all published IATI files. And we're doing that at the moment. That works. We've got a server side doing that, and we're currently, I think we're about 8 hours from the point at which it goes onto the registry to the point at which we have a produced validation report, and that's across all 8,000 files. So that will definitely be there. That'll be available. The other thing is we are the architecture of the on-demand on-demand route is serverless, and so it is on demand. The architecture is on demand. So if you were, in theory, to send 10 simultaneous requests, you'll get those requests back in the same amount of time as one request. We don't know how far we can push that yet because we're at an early stage of development, but we're hoping to be able to support quite a high demand on that side of things as well. But in answer to your initial question, yes, absolutely. The pre-baked reports will be available via an API route. We don't have that. We haven't implemented that yet. The reason we haven't implemented that yet is we know that this second route it's the engine that drives everything. That route, all of those reports will be produced by hitting this first route that we've developed. So if we get that right, everything else will fall into place. And if we get that wrong, nothing else will fall into place. And that's why we're doing that one first.
Okay, clear. Yeah. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Alex. Any other questions that anyone would like to raise? You can pop them in the chat if you would, and I'd be happy to call on you if you wanted to speak through them. My screen isn't well set up at the moment to see if anyone's raising hands. So if you do have a question, please pop it in the chat. And if no other questions, we can probably bring this session to a close. I think yes, there's the next slide. Great. Just to sort of give you some pointers to where you can find out more information, there was a blog post that was published in December on the IATI website, and that talks about the technical stock take and the recommendations and how they've set out our work for the next year or so. I'm due to do a quarterly update news post, which hopefully will be published next week, and that will reflect what work has gone on since that last blog post in December. So what we've done in Q1 and also what's coming ahead in Q2. And then last but not least, we are always ready to be contacted directly. If you want to email us, come on to IATI Connect. We are here. We're happy to chat, happy to take your questions, happy to get your input. And really a big thank you so far to everyone who has participated in these conversations about the Validator API. It's been really good to get your feedback.